Isaiah chapter 13. The burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amoz saw. Set up a banner on the bare mountain, lift up your voice to them, wave your hand that they may go into the gates of the nobles. I have commanded my consecrated ones, yes, I have called my mighty men for my anger, even my proudly exulting ones. The noise of the multitude is in the mountains, as of a great people. The noise of an uproar of the kingdoms of the nations gathered together. Yahweh of armies is mustering the army for battle. They come from a far country, from the uttermost part of heaven, even Yahweh and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. Wail, for Yahweh's day is at hand. It will come as destruction from the Almighty. Therefore, all hands will be feeble, and everyone's heart will melt. They will be dismayed. Pangs and sorrow will seize them. They will be in pain like a woman in labor. They will look in amazement at one another. Their faces will be faces of flame. Behold, the day of Yahweh comes, cruel, with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land a desolation and to destroy sinners out of it. For the stars of the sky and its constellations will not give their light. The sun will be darkened in its going out, and the moon will not cause its light to shine. I will punish the world for their evil, and the wicked for their iniquity. I will cause the arrogance of the proud to cease, and will humble the arrogance of the terrible. I will make people more rare than fine gold, even a person than the pure gold of Ophir. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will be shaken out of its place, in Yahweh of armies' wrath, and in the day of his fierce anger. It will happen that like a hunted gazelle, and like sheep that no one gathers, they will each turn to their own people, and will each flee to their own land. Everyone who is found will be thrust through. Everyone who is captured will fall by the sword. Their infants also will be dashed in pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be ransacked, and their wives raped. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, who will not value silver, and as for gold, they will not delight in it. Their bows will dash the young men in pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes will not spare children. Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldeans' pride, will be like when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It will never be inhabited, neither will it be lived in from generation to generation. The Arabian will not pitch a tent there, neither will shepherds make their flocks lie down there, but wild animals of the desert will lie there, and their houses will be full of jackals. Ostriches will dwell there, and wild goats will frolic there. Wolves will cry in their fortresses, and jackals in their pleasant palaces. Her time is near to come, and her days will not be prolonged. Okay. So we've started now a series of chapters from chapter 13 right through, which are called burdens. This one says a burden against Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amoz saw. So the book of Isaiah is a book. It's in order. It's a whole series of things. We often look at them as like separate chapters, each standing alone, but it makes a lot of sense as a book. So we've just been through all this period of time where we've been talking about God's judgment against Israel. God's going to raise up the Assyrians. After that, the Lord's going to deal with Assyria. And then the Lord's going to, the Messiah's going to come, and all these wonderful things are going to happen. But now we're going to start seeing what the Lord's going to do to the other nations. So there's going to be a series of these prophecies against all these nations that were surrounding Israel. So the first one is Babylon. Now, there's lots of different types of prophecies. So you can have a prophecy which says what's going to happen. It can be good. That would be called a prophecy. But these ones are all called burdens. And what that means is it's a heavy prophecy, like a judgment prophecy. Now, as we go through, there's going to be the burden against Babylon, the burden against the Philistines, the burden against Moab. We're going to get to a point where there's a prophecy, not a burden, against or about Ethiopia, but then we're going to immediately go back, a burden against Egypt. So not every prophecy is a burden, but the burden prophecies are terrible judgment prophecies. And this first one is about Babylon. Now, what's so interesting about this one is that Babylon wasn't even like an empire yet. The Babylonian Empire wasn't even strong for like at least 100 years. So what was happening at the time of Isaiah, Isaiah was alive during the reigns of these four kings, what were they? Jotham, Ahaz, Uzziah, and Hezekiah, those four kings. And during their lifetimes, the Assyrian Empire was the strong one. And during the days of Hezekiah, that was when the rod of Assyria was raised up, which we talked about in chapter 10. But he's prophesying here about Babylon, which wasn't even the serious empire for like 100 years later. So he's prophesying this like doom and terrible thing against Babylon, but Babylon hadn't even got to the point yet where it had done the terrible things to deserve the punishment, if you know what I'm trying to say. That's one of the very cool things about the book of Isaiah. Some people have said, Isaiah was written by all these different people and, none of it was really predictions. Some, they're trying to explain away. But the very oldest parts of Isaiah are still predicting things which were in the advance. Isaiah is a true prophet, and the things he says are very interesting and very cool. So there's this prophecy about Babylon, which wasn't even really a big thing yet. And it's 100 years into the future. And it says some things about the Babylonians that are remarkable. So it says, for example, that an army is going to be raised up by the Lord and is going to come against them from a far country. It says they come from a far country, from the uttermost part of heaven. Even Yahweh and his weapons of indignation will destroy the land. A little bit later in verse 13 it says that they were the Medes. And they were. So the guy that came against Babylon was a guy called Cyrus the Great. And he was, part of the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire was of the Medes and the Persians, these two different groups. And I'm pretty sure that Cyrus did something like diverted a river. And it was, so the Euphrates River, I'm pretty sure, was the river that flowed through Babylon. And they had this amazing system of protection where part of the city had these huge walls, but part of the city was protected by this moat. But what Cyrus did was upstream, he diverted parts of the river. The water level fell and they were able to get into the city somehow because the water level was low. And when we get to the book of Daniel and we're reading in chapter 5, chapter 5 describes the very night that King Cyrus went into the city. And that was the night where the hand of God wrote on the wall. And we'll get to that. Very, very interesting. But that was Cyrus the Great fulfilling the word of Isaiah right here in chapter 13 when the Medes came against the Babylonians. Now, it gets even more interesting when we get to verse 10. It says, "The stars will fall from the sky. Constellations will not give their light. The sun will go dark. The moon will not shine." Now, where have you heard that before? Where you've heard that is in Matthew chapter 24, when Jesus is talking about Jerusalem. Now, in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus actually is quoting Isaiah right here from chapter 13. Jesus was asked some questions in Matthew about the temple and about Jerusalem. The disciples were looking at the temple and saying, "This building is unbelievably cool. Look at this amazing building." Jesus says, "I tell you, not one stone will be left upon another." And the disciples go, when will that happen? And what's the sign that you're going to come? So one of the questions the disciples wanted to know about is, when's this going to happen to Jerusalem? When's the temple going to be, destroyed? And, when are you coming again? Basically it's an end of the world question. Jesus then goes on in Matthew chapter 24 to answer the two questions. And but he quotes here. He quotes Isaiah 13 and he says, "The sun will not shine, the stars will fall from the sky." And so those are what you call figures of speech or metaphors. Because when Babylon was destroyed, there came a point when Babylon was completely destroyed. Now, it didn't happen at the time of Cyrus. Cyrus did enter the city and he destroyed the Babylonian Empire, but the city of Babylon was a little bit later completely destroyed. And in the chapter we read, it said it would not be inhabited again. And to this day, it has not been inhabited. No one lives in Babylon. The city of Babylon doesn't exist anymore. The Babylonian Empire was destroyed, but then a little bit later, the Babylonian city was destroyed and it no longer exists. So that's completely true. But when that happened, the stars didn't fall from the sky and the sun didn't go out. So the point we're supposed to take from that is it was a metaphor. Because Jesus quoted that to talk about when the Temple of Jerusalem would be destroyed. So when the Temple of Jerusalem was destroyed, that's when the Roman armies came. And the Roman armies flattened the temple and flattened the city, and they destroyed Jerusalem in just the same way Babylon was destroyed. But for some reason, people think Jesus was using that to talk about the end of the world. They think the end of the world is going to be when the sun goes out and the stars fall from the sky. It kind of does sound a bit like the end of the world. You know, Jesus was using the same language that described the destroying of Babylon to describe the destroying of Jerusalem. What that language means is that the lights are going out. You know, the leading stars are going out. Light means lots of things. Like, say, for example, we call important people stars. Celebrities are called stars. You know, politicians are sometimes called our leading lights. Light, the idea of light is the idea of having understanding, of intelligence, from being able to see, to know what you're doing, to understand the situation. All of that's called light. So Jesus is using the analogy to describe the fact that the important people are going to be pulled down. The stars will fall from the sky and the lights are going to go out. There's going to be no more nation, no more understanding, no more leadership, no more politics, no more celebrities. It's all coming down. That's definitely what happened in Babylon, which Isaiah predicted, and that's definitely what happened in Jerusalem, which Jesus predicted, but Jesus quoted Isaiah and just applied the Babylon message to Jerusalem. And later on in the book of Revelation, Jerusalem actually gets called by the name of Babylon. So there's kind of like a double prophecy going on about Jerusalem. All very, very interesting. By the way, when we get to Matthew 24, we'll talk more about that passage. Some of the passage does answer the one question about the destruction of Jerusalem, and that's pretty much everything up to verse 32 or so. And after verse 32, then Jesus is answering the second question, and that is about his return. And the simple answer about his return is, we don't know. But up to verse 32, everything is definitely about the destruction of Jerusalem. Even the bits that sound like the end of the world, like the stars will fall from the sky, it's not apocalyptic in the way that you were thinking. So here we've got the first of the burdens, the burden against Babylon, and Babylon was most certainly destroyed, even though it wasn't an empire at the time that Isaiah predicted it. Well, Lord, thank you for this chapter 13. Thank you for the interesting things we find in here. And I pray you give us eyes to understand the scriptures and eyes to understand the way the prophets speak and the way that you use language. Give us, Lord, the sense of all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.